Again, this is Jenny Wilson, and I'm going to cover a little bit about Creo and converting over to a subscription, and then thereafter we're going to get to see some of those extensions in a demonstration. So for those of you that don't know who EAC is, we are helping companies design, manufacture, service with the power to connect. So what does this mean to you? We can help with your individual product needs, whether it's Creo for design, MathCAD for engineering calculations, Windchill for product data, or ThingWorx for IoT. With that being said, we're a solution partner of PTC, and we are the leading PTC Global Windchill Global Services provider and have been for about 15 years. We're also part of PTC's Exclusive Services Advantage program. So today we're going to focus on the design piece of EAC. So the goal of this presentation is to let you know what you gain when going to a subscription and the benefits of that. So we're going to start with a couple things that you gain with going to a subscription. You gain a couple different things. You get flexible modeling, design exploration, human factors extension, and then you also get eLearning, home use licenses, and performance advisor. A little bit on flexible modeling. So what it does is it makes design changes a lot more easier to do. You are allowed to create Creo data changes regardless of design intent. So you can modify non-Creo data regardless of its origin, whether it's STEP, SolidWorks, CATIA, NX, that kind of thing. You can recognize rounds, chamfers, patterns, and create or recreate design intent and record edits as features. So that's one of the things that is a benefit with flexible modeling. Design exploration is where you can explore design changes safely without risking original designs or committing to any changes. Think about design iterations. So if you have chair 1, chair 2, chair 3, you can make changes to each one of those changes before changing the actual design intent. And then the third piece is human factors design. So you can quickly insert and customize digital human models to prevent ergonomic mismatches and reduce prototyping costs. You can really easily manipulate mannequins and visualize human reach and vision.
And Jenny, I'm just going to chime in and just ask for some clarification around what does it mean when we say that we are converting to a subscription?
Sure. So right now, PTC, they are 100% a subscription house. So they are no longer offering perpetual licenses. With that being said, you can continue to run your perpetual licenses, but you have the option to either convert your perpetual license to subscriptions, or if you want to purchase new, you can do that in a subscription form. Nothing is going to change on your support. You'll continue to run the same way as you do. The support will now be included. So when you go to subscription, being the fact that it's just a new thing that's going on with PTC, they want to give you some additional benefits of switching to a subscription. So just going on some additional benefits, we covered flexible modeling, design exploration, human factors design. Some additional things that you also get an e-learning license with each one of your Creo licenses that you purchase when you're in a subscription. And then on top of that, you get some home use licenses. So we all know that pulling your license, checking your license off the server and bringing it home is a little bit of a tedious process right now. You can skip that, pulling it off the server, and go into just having a home use license locked to a desktop or a laptop and working from home, as opposed to having to check that license out. And then the last piece is Performance Advisor, which comes with each one of your licenses. And this provides a really good insight into the health of your Creo environment. You can proactively provide approved solutions to identify issues and really see how Creo is performing through your hardware, product, and individual user. The last piece I want to touch on is right now, PTC has an option to convert your guys' license, right? So they have what's called a loyalty program. And to incentivize you switching from perpetual to subscription, they've come up with a program called the loyalty conversion. In which case, the loyalty conversion, you get to pick 3 out of 4 extensions, so piping and cabling, simulation, interactive surface design extension, and additive manufacturing. You get to get 3 out of those 4 extensions. Additionally, you get all the additional pieces that I had touched on earlier. So flexible modeling, e-learning, home use licenses, design exploration, and human factors. So that's the kind of the deal and special that they're going on, and the PTC is incentivizing customers so that you can switch over to perpetual, or from perpetual to subscription. My apologies. So with that, I will hand it over to Bill and let him show the functionality of some of these extensions that you get with a subscription.
All right, Jenny, can you see my screen okay?
I can, thank you.
Okay. So thanks everybody for attending. I am the aforementioned Bill Schlund. I will be covering the 4 modules that you get when moving to a subscription license. And I'm going to kind of cover them in this order. I don't have to, but I just chose this order. Talk about flexible modeling, e-learning, design exploration, and finally we'll hit on Mannequin. So first of all, let's take a look at an assembly that I have here. We're going to be using flex modeling. As you look over here in the model tree, you'll probably recognize that these are not Creo parts. These are imported parts. They happen to be SolidWorks parts, as we can see from their extensions. But I'm going to show you 2 examples of using flex modeling. The first one is going to be in the traditional sense, and then I'll show you something that's a little bit different. But here I want to make some changes to this assembly that I have. Flex modeling works on a part-by-part basis. So basically, I want to modify a part, I activate it, and then I'll have a flex modeling. So for instance, if I select this part here, we can see it in the model tree. I'm going to say activate. As soon as I do that, you'll notice that the tab right here for flexible modeling appears. This is the active part, and now I can perform various edits on it. If we turn on our features here, what we'll see is that when we bring in a part like this, it basically just brings in an import feature, just like bringing in a step file or an IGES file. But we have the ability to make these features, it has feature recognition capabilities, but make these features parametric in nature. For instance, I could do something simple. I have a radius here, so we can do something real simple. Let's just say edit a radius. It's going to say, all right, we're going to make some changes to the part. I pick on that. It says this is the current radius, and I could say let's make it 20 instead. And notice it changes the geometry. In fact, I can just have the drag handles here and move it that way. Now that I've changed that, what we see in the tree here is a parametric feature. This is a regular round. Now I can go back and redefine it, reorder it, modify it anytime I want. It's now parametric. So this portion of our model is parametric. Let's go in and take a look at some other things. I mentioned before that we could do some feature recognition. So I'm going to pick on a slot right here. I'm going to say recognize this as a cut. So I can recognize it as a cut here if I use this option, and it just checks the hole. But if I use a cut with external references, or not really references, but for the edges, it's actually including the chamfers. So we can kind of see the difference between just the hole and the hole with the chamfers. And that's really what I want to grab, is everything associated with this. And now that I've selected it, I'll just say, are there any other things in this part that look like that? And it comes back and says, yep, there are 4. And it highlights little indicators where the other versions it found are like that. You notice this one up here is not, even though it's a hole with chamfers, it's not the same diameter. So it's finding exact duplicates so it can make a pattern. I'm going to go in here and say, let's change some things. Instead of having 4 holes, let's just have 3, and we'll maybe change their spacing to 23 millimeters. And now when I say okay, we've got 3 holes. And as you see over here, it's a parametric pattern. Again, I can change it to 50 holes if I wanted to. Let's go and take a look at something else. Here I have, again, another hole. And in this case, I'm going to grab this and we'll say, yeah, recognize, the chamfers on it. And I'm going to do a move. I'm going to say move by dimension. And I want to move this hole. I actually want to move it over in this area over here so it lines up with this axis. So I have kind of an access hole where I can get some tools in. So I'm just going to say, let's move it from here over to the center of this guy. here. And it says you're referencing another part. So it's pro-engineer basically saying, yep, we're going to reference another part to get that distance. And saying right now, the distance between those two components is right here. It's like 42 millimeters. I'm going to say make the distance 0. Basically move this guy right on top of there. That's what the 0 means. So it moves it over. It gets rid of the first one. And I really wanted to keep that one as well. So I can just hit a button up here, say make a copy. So I basically just made a copy of that. Now I have a great access to get at the components on the other side here. And I have the original hole here. So we can stick a shaft through there. Another thing that we can do is something simple. We did a move by dimension. I'm just going to say move with a drag handle. But what I can do is select some surfaces that I want to move. I want to really move this tab that we're looking at here. I'm going to say grab this. So I've grabbed some surfaces here, and when I drag those, the side ones are going to go. So I'll just say let's move that. And I have a little drag handle. I can drag it in any direction I choose. I'm going to say let's pick this edge so I can drag it along this edge. By picking an edge, you'll notice that it's giving me a dimension here, so I can move it exactly 1 inch or 25 millimeters or whatever I want to. But look what's happening. As I pull this back to the right, you notice that this is extending out. What really happened is this was built right on the edge of a radius. So as I pull this feature away, it just extends the radius. It always heals itself behind the geometry. Well, I'd really want to kind of keep it flat along here. There's all kinds of options that we have. So I can go over here under attachment, and I can say, let's create a side surface based right off of here. And so it just fills in that extension with a flat surface. And so now I can kind of not have to worry about creating any geometry that has kind of a drop off in that area. So there we've made a change to that particular part. So this is flexible modeling in the traditional sense, right? We call up some geometry. It doesn't really matter where it is. It could be Pro-E geometry. And from that standpoint, it's actually pretty good for doing design reviews. If your manager or customer says, hey, why don't you move this over here or change this? And you're thinking, oh, by the way I built this part, if I parametrically make that change, it might work, it might not. I might have to go into redefine. Here you can just grab geometry, like I said, anybody's geometry, including our own, and make those changes non-parametrically, and have a chance of getting some real-time feedback and not worrying about parent-child relationships and relations and all that kind of stuff. So with that, I'm going to close out this window, and I'm going to call up another part here. So this is in a more non-traditional sense, a way of using flex modeling. What I did is, this is an import feature, so this is actually a step file, it's imported. And what I want to do is make some changes to it. This radius that we see here in green is what I really want to make the change to. And there was a customer that said, will you change the radius that we sent you? Right now it's like 60 thousandths. Could you change it to 150 thousandths? And it's like, oh, cool. Well, I got flex modeling. I can do that. I'm just going to say edit the radius like we did before. I'll pick on it. You can see, okay, it's 70 thousandths. I'm going to say, let's make it 150. I'll say 0.15. It can't do it. By extending this radius, it's bumping into all kinds of other things, and it's not going to be able to create that. So then what do? This is where it comes into the more of a non-traditional way of working with imported geometry. What I need to do is simplify this model so it's at a point where I can put in this radius and make it easy to use, or easy to manipulate to the size that I want. So I'm going to pick on a round here. I'm going to say recognize all the other rounds that are attached to it. So grabbed all of those. I'm going to say include this one. I'm going to use a remove feature. And what it does is it removes that round and then heals behind it, right? We got sharp edges. Another thing I'm going to do is if I tried to change it now that radius, it still wouldn't work, right? So I'm going to have to change some other things. I'm going to go in here and pick on some of these rounds. And in fact, I'm actually going to take out this whole corner and pick all of this. I'm going to say remove that. So now you can see it's starting to simplify our geometry quite a bit. Over on this end, we have kind of the same issue. I'm going to grab some rounds here. We'll say remove those. Even at this point, if I tried to make this radius here 150 thousandths, it still wouldn't work, okay, because I tried. So what I'm going to do is select on this, say recognize these rounds, and let's remove that. So now we have really, really simple geometry. Now, one of the things I need is I do need to put this big radius in the corner here. It wasn't really a sharp edge. It did have a radius, and it was 150 thousandths, believe it or not, right here in the corner. So I'm just going to use Pro Engineer. I'm just going to use Creo to say, let's go in and put a radius here, and we'll make it 150, right? Which is what it was originally. I did a measurement before. But so that's what our radius looks like now. So now we have the pocket without any of the rounds on it. I'm just going to pick this edge and say, now we can use the power of Creo and say, let's put this in. Oh, actually, I should probably get rid of this guy too. All right, so now we'll put in our radius. And again, Creo is really good at putting in rounds, so I know that I'm going to be able to just come in here, pick on an edge. Here's our 150 thousandths. Now that it doesn't have all those other rounds to worry about, it's really easy for me to do that. And now I can just kind of come in and start putting in the other rounds that I need. Pick one along the edge. And actually, this one was like 60 thousandths. Maybe put one along this edge. And then finally, just clean it up, bringing it back kind of the way that it was. This one along here was about 100 thousandths. And so now we've recreated our IGES file without having to go into import data doctor where you'd be deleting rounds and then trimming surfaces. All I'm doing is just removing the geometry to simplify it. And then now that I had simple geometry, I can start piling on our Creo features to give me the radius that I wanted in the corner here. So that's more of a non-traditional way of using flex modeling. But again, it works with anybody's data, right? As long as it's solid geometry. It works with surfacing, but really with solid geometry, it does that healing process that it goes through when you do removes and things like that. So that was our examples of flex modeling. Our next thing I wanted to talk about is eLearning. So I'm going to pop up eLearning here, and actually to do that, I'm going to have to move my model or my window over a little bit. And as you see when I click on there, it brings us into capabilities of doing different tutorials, right? So tutorials are little snippets of this is what you need to do in this particular instance. This is what you can do with this. So here are some tutorials, different ones we can see for getting started. And it's kind of using flexible modeling because that's what I was in last. We could go say, do a search. And let's do a search for like sheet metal. I do that. So now we have some tutorials on sheet metal. If I select on one of these, here's the tutorial. I can push the play button. And what it's doing is it's going through and explaining the different ways of using the sheet metal. Actually, in this one, it doesn't. Here we're talking about using different capabilities here. And I'm here a guy talking in my ear, but he's explaining exactly using the RIP tools and how you would do that. There's also, we can make this full screen. And on some of these, there's closed caption where you can click it and it'll actually put the words that the guy is saying on there. Another thing, let's do a search. Actually, let's do a browse. We'll go over to browse. We can see all the different areas we can have. Let's look at Creo Simulate if I wanted to know a little bit more about doing analysis. Okay, so here are the tutorials, different types of tutorials. As I mentioned before, for doing Creo Simulate. If I wanted a full line course of doing Simulate, that's where the courses are. And also we can go over here, we can join a discussion about Simulate and to the PTC community. But we'll say if we select on finite element analysis, it asks me to log in. So I'm just going to use my login here. And when I do that, what this brings me into is the full course of Creo Simulate. So this will be, talk to a training advisor, yep. But then we can see the full course, play through it. Again, same as a tutorial, except they're longer, right? And being able to give you full kind of a discussion on any particular topic. We could go into flexible modeling, do a search on flexible. Here again, we have tutorials. We also have, let's see what we have, different courses down here. That's just basic articles down here. But again, this will be talking about flexible modeling in more of a traditional sense, right? The first example I did where we're grabbing geometry and moving it and making edits and things like that. But again, everything that we need to learn about anything in Creo is right there. We can do searches, we can browse through different topics as we saw here. We can access online communities, as we see here, ask a question, get answers from other users and things like that. So this is really kind of a nice, easy way of people that are either getting familiar with Creo or maybe are infrequent users and you forgot how to do a particular type of draft or something like that. You just go in and type it in and you get a tutorial real quickly and easily on that particular subject. Or you can go into a full-blown class of surfacing if you wanted to do that as well. So that's a little bit along the lines of the e-learning. Again, it's really simple to use. You just hit this little hat right here next to the search, and it brings you into the e-learning. The basic type of things that are offered here, this is just kind of the default home page that you start off with, but it talks about kind of some recommended tutorials that are available to you. We could say, you know, let's see more of those. Again, we have a bigger list of different types of tutorials. Here's some stuff with freestyle and a variety of other capabilities. Again, all really quick, easy, you know, 5-minute, less than 5-minute tutorials that we can go through. So with that, I'm going to kind of end our discussion on e-learning, and let's move into design exploration. So what Jenny had talked about earlier in design exploration is that it allows people to go through more of the iterative process without having to make a lot of copies of things. So typically, the way things have been done in the past is that someone would go in and say, let's make some modifications, kind of iterate a little bit on some potential variations that we can make with our design that we have. And what you'd do is you'd maybe back it up to another folder, call it up, start working with it, and then maybe you want to make some other changes, so you go to another folder, back it up, and pretty soon you have all these folders or different areas with different ideas. And if you try to go through a design review and review all of them, you call up one idea, then you erase it out of memory and call up another one, and it's just kind of a hassle. What this allows you to do is do those type of things real quickly and easily, and all in one session. So it automatically does the kind of erasing of RAM if it needs to call up the same part, but it's modified a little bit. So we'll kind of show you the power of this tool. It's really, really unique in the Creo capabilities. So I'm going to go over here to start up design. I just go under here with manage session, and it's design exploration. And we can either open an existing one, someone has been working on something, or we can start a new one. So I'm going to say start a new one. And we just can call this like chair ideas, something like that. And we put in a description and things like that. So what this is doing is actually going to capture a session. As I go and make modifications, make changes, I can delete parts, bring in new parts, make modifications to existing parts, do all kinds of things. I'm free to do whatever I want. The nice thing about it is the very first, this is going to create another tree, a listing of all the changes that I make. And every time I get to a change that I want to kind of be able to go back to at any point, it's called a checkpoint. I just hit this button here or this hyperlink and it creates that checkpoint for me. But you'll notice right here, the very top one is pre-modified. No matter what I do, I could delete everything. I can always go back and hit pre-modified and it brings me back to where I started. So I don't have to worry about ever losing or screwing up any of my existing geometry. We're doing this all on top of that or in spite of having it around. It's kind of, this will be in the background, always to be able to get access to. So let's go and start making some modifications to our chair that we have here for right now. First thing, I'll look at this chair, and I'll say, well, if someone's sitting on the chair and they kind of want to pull the seat back, let's see here. If I pull it back, you notice it's bringing the handles up with it. So the handles are kind of assembled onto the bottom of the chair, which is not a good thing for a reclining chair. So I want to make some changes to these handles initially. So I'm going to go over here, just make sure I have features displayed so I can see the individual features of parts. And I'll go over here to where the handles are, right? So the handles are highlighted right here at the bottom of our model tree. I'm going to say take the existing handles that we have here and suppress them. So they're gone. So now we have no arms at all on our chair. And here's some other ones that I had brought in here. I'm going to select on this and say, let's resume that. And now we have a different set of arms on our chair. And now in this case, if I grab this guy and move it down, you'll notice that the arms go with the chair because they go through the back of the chair. So this might be a design that we want to keep. This is a kind of a good idea, at least for discussion purposes. So this is a good point for a checkup or checkpoint. So I just click on this and it says, what do you want to call it? And I could just say, let's call it like new arms. I can put in a description. I can put in a keyword. So if I have lots and lots of different checkpoints, I can just search by a keyword. It could be attached. You know, these arms are attached to the back of the chair instead of the way they were before. Or we can put in a lot of other comments to help better describe that. But here we have a new checkpoint. So we can see we have the arms that we swapped out. And like I said before, anytime we want, I can go back to pre-modified, and there's where we started out. So it's really easy for us to just kind of really quickly go between different ideas. And it could be something simple as just changing colors or changing textures to, you know, physically changing geometry or swapping out parts like I did here. Let's take a look at something else on this chair. Maybe we want to have it be kind of hug you a little bit better along the back here, have it be a little bit more curved to the individual that's sitting in it. So I'm going to say let's unhide basically the freestyle feature here. And I'm going to say let's redefine this guy. Let's just take him So this back chair was created with a freestyle feature. I'm just going to drag a box around this area here. And I'm going to say, let's pull this curvature, this chair out a little bit. See, I can pull it out so it hugs you a little bit more. I'll say, you know, let's not go crazy, but we'll move it out a little bit, maybe like this. And then we're probably going to want to do the same on the bottom, maybe kind of for lumbar support or something like that. So I'm going to say, let's do the same down here. Just kind of drag it. Again, this is kind of the power of the freestyle feature. Kind of pull out kind of a little lumbar area, something like that. And then say, okay. And again, everybody has freestyle. But so now we have that. If we say regenerate, our chair updates to that. I'm just going to rehide. You can see now it's a lot more curved. It's going to really hold you in place, so you won't be falling out of your chair. Let's go and take a look at some other things. And again, this is probably a good idea for another opportunity to, let's just kind of regen this guy. There we can see the curvature. And this would be a good point for another checkpoint, right? And this one we could call, I don't know, let's just call it like lumbar. So now we have another checkpoint. You can see, so this is really the process we go through. We can make changes, and then we can just click through those changes to do reviews very, very easily. Let's go down and take a look at maybe the wheels down here. So we can see that we have 4 of those. One of the things I've noticed a lot on chairs nowadays, and particularly even the one that I'm sitting in right now, there's 5 wheels. And 4 wheels is kind of out of vogue nowadays. So what I'm going to do is say, let's go over and take a look at this. Let's change this. Instead of 4, let's switch it to 5. And we can update that. And we have 5 wheels. Again, another good place for a checkpoint. So I'll do that. I'll just take the default name. So now we can go through these different checkpoints. As we see, we've created 3 of them. I can go back to a previous one, maybe back when there was 4. So we'll say, let's go back to, well, we can review the arms. Oh, I didn't save the 4. Ha, good, Bill. So let's make a change to this. But what I can do is go back to maybe this point here when there were 4 and say, maybe if we want to have this lumbar support in there, we also want to maybe change the profile of these arms for the legs that are sticking out. So I can go over here and say, let's kind of move this guy around a little bit. So let's make a change. Here we can see it's just made, let's kind of make it kind of arched, something like that. Say, okay. So this is what those look like now. So now I can do that, say, let's add a checkpoint here. So it's basically kind of a branch. And we'll say 4 legs arched. So now we have a variety of different types. And as you can see, we can go back to an idea that we like, you know, and then make some further modifications on it, or we can just kind of continue on with the status quo of having 5 wheels. But the whole idea is I can go through here. Again, we always have the pre-modified that we can go back to anytime we want, so we don't have to worry about screwing up anything. Now, the interesting thing about this design exploration is that it's been saving this whole process. So I can say save out, and it will just save the changes. So if I had a truck, and the only thing I was manipulating was the right side mirror, when I saved it out, it would only save the mirror. So that would be someone, you'd do something like that if you had a windshield system or it was inside your company where everybody else has access to all the models. But if you wanted to send it to a third party, what we do is back up the whole thing, right? All the changes and all the parts. So there's kind of 2 ways of backing up. You can back up just the changes, the modifications you made, really tiny file, or back up everything, and then it's a fully intact, you know, beginning to end turnkey type of a zip file that we can open up and we get everything with it. So I'm going to go through and show you an example of kind of calling up one of those. I'm going to say, let's just exit out of our session here. We don't really need to save it, but this was going to save it out, our session. I'll just say, let's not do that. I'll close this out and kind of erase them out of memory. I'm going to call up an example of one of those sessions, sort of for a design review. So I'll call it up here. It says it's going to bring it in. So here's what we're going to be working with. Again, we got this kind of chair theme going on today, but we see what kind of a chair that you might see in maybe a hair salon or something like that. We can always go back to the pre-modified. That's what we started out with, right? Kind of the chair that we had at the very beginning. We can go over here and kind of check through the different versions here. They made the 5 legs with the arches here. You can go over here. Here they changed the arms. Again, or 5 wheels, but kind of flattened out a little bit. Again, here's kind of that salon chair, but with a different type of little arms on there. You go back here, take a look at just the chair itself. Maybe you want to just place this on a riding lawnmower or something like that. And then we can get kind of crazy. We can maybe make a swinging chair for a baby, or we can even kind of make a, take a look at this guy, kind of a Segway chair. You can just kind of sit and drive around the office. So the only point I'm trying to get across here is that it's very easy for us to create and iterate all in the same session, all in one place, kind of rummage through those, thumb through all the different checkpoints that we have. And then once we decide, this is the version that we wanted, then you save it. Then you say, okay, let's save it. And going forward from now on, when I call up the chair, it'll be this. But I can still always have the session available so I can go back and page through the other iterations and maybe go off in a different way with some other version that we might have come up with. Right? So that's a little bit about the design exploration module. Again, really easy to use. No training really. All you have to do is just go in and start making changes and making checkpoints. And that's all you need to do. So I'm going to close out of this. We'll say let's exit. And that's going to bring us to our final discussion point, which is Mannequin. And as Jenny mentioned again earlier, is that the Mannequin capability allows us to put a real life human factors type person in an assembly. So here I have kind of a shop floor, and this is going to allow us to do some work with Mannequin. So there's a Mannequin tab, right? And then we kind of start on the left like you do in every other application. And here is insert a Mannequin, right? So the free version of Mannequin that everybody's always had access to just brings in a generic person, right? But here we can see there's males, females from different countries. So I could say, let's get a male, maybe 50 percentile. Let's go see if we got any other USA guys down here. Let's get a big guy. So here's 95th percentile guy. So kind of a football player guy. I'll say, let's bring him in. And says, okay, where do you want to place him? And I'll say, let's just place him right here by this machine. So he's standing by the machine. So this is the options that we get. So we bring in that Mannequin. We placed him at that particular point. If I want a different point, I can place him over here and he kind of moves. Which direction is he facing? So I'm just going to say face the machine. So I'll flip him around this way. And then I can kind of move him around a little bit. I want to get him a little bit closer to the machine, maybe right here, and say, all right, that looks pretty good. Again, I can keep picking points. Another thing you can do, see, it added the Mannequin here in our model tree. So I can always just say, let's redefine. And then I kind of like this way better, so I can kind of slide them forward a little bit and right or left, the way I want. But get them pretty close to the machine here. Because what I want him to do is start working on this machine. He needs to grab onto this area over here. So first of all, can he reach that? There's this thing called reach envelope. And it usually brings it in a transparent mode. I got to set my config option for that. But basically, if you stretch your arms out and swing them around your head, this is kind of the reach envelope. And really all I was looking for is, can he reach that hydraulic piston that was over there? So yes, he can. So now a question of, let's get his arm over there, get his hand over there. So there's some things over here we can say is manipulate the Mannequin. And I can use just a 2D point drag. I can just grab his hand. So I just click on it, and then I just drag it. And so I can kind of move him around and move it wherever I want. There's actually kind of a better way of doing it in for this particular example that I want. And what I want him to do is reach. So there's this reach right here. I'll say, let's just reach his hand onto this hydraulic cylinder. He's not quite close enough to do that. So even though we got a big, tall football player here, so I'm going to take this guy and move him forward just a little bit. So now if we do a reach, say take this, let's put it over here. Maybe not. I have to move them even closer, I think. So again, just kind of manipulating people around. The reach envelope was including his fingers, and really I want his fingers to be grabbing on the back end of this thing. So that's why we're going to have to do our reach this way. All right, so there we go. So now he's reaching on to our hydraulic cylinder that's back there. Another thing that we can do, which is really kind of neat, is that we can go and look through his eyes and see what he sees. So we can go over here and say vision window. And what it does is this little window that we have down here, again, we can size it to any size we want. This is what he sees. And I could say, why don't you look at this area right here? I click on that, and you notice that his head turns, and now we can see out his eyes with regular vision. This is what he would see. If I want to make some changes, we can go back to this manipulate that we saw before, and I could say, let's change direction he's looking. And I can just take this and just kind of drag him. And I'm turning his head, and we can see that it's updating over there. So it's really simple for us to kind of go in and make some changes. See, as I kind of turning his head to the right here, we can see the view in our little window changing. So again, we'll have him kind of looking a little bit more where he should be looking, right there. But again, we get a real idea of if a person is standing at this machine, what's his visibility? This is great for vehicle design, right? If you're driving a vehicle, can you see what's in front of you or on the side if you're looking out the side? You know, what really can you see? Is there anything blocking your vision? Something like that. So let's go in and take a look at adding something else to this. I'm gonna go zoom back over here. Here we have a cart, all right? So I wanna add another mannequin over here at the cart. So I'm gonna say, let's insert another mannequin. This time, let's grab a female, let's say from Italy, 50 percentile. I'll place her maybe right here. I'll say maybe facing, let's face these boxes. And now there's some things that we can do I haven't talked about yet. Let's move her up a little bit closer maybe. Our positions. So we've always brought them in just kind of standing at attention here, but there's a lot of different positions, and we can create our user-defined positions as well. But this little button right here, apply a posture. And we can see lots of different ones, you know, sitting, standing, crossing your legs, all of those type of things. What she's going to need to do is push this cart. So I'm just going to come down here, take a look. You know, so we also have hand positions that we can change. But we're going to go over here and say, let's push a cart. So here we can see she's pushing, but she's doesn't have her hands on the cart yet. This is where we can use that reach that we used before. I'm going to say, let's just reach, put your hand on the handle up here, and say okay. And then put this hand on the handle up here. Looks kind of uncomfortable. But again, we can go into postures that we saw before, and we saw the hand grip type things. And here we can say, let's have a kind of a cylindrical grip. Now she's grabbing on. So now we have a person pushing a cart. All right. So this in all of itself is, okay, fine. So we got someone pushing a cart. What does that mean? There's a lot of information that the insurance companies have gathered over the years, mostly for workers' comp, I think, and things like that. But what they did is a lot of studies about human capabilities. What can you ask a person to do without overstretching their abilities? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to a pushing analysis. This is from Snook, right? So this is an industry standard. And it says who's doing the pushing. I select that person. Is it pulling or pushing? So I'm going to say this person is pushing. What's the distance? How far do you got to push the cart? We could say, I don't know, 25 feet. Frequency, how often do you have to do that? I could say once every, and we won't overwork this person, once every 5 minutes. Now the initial force when we have to start pushing the cart is maybe, let's say 18 pounds, right? And then once it's rolling, it's less than that, right? Kind of, you have rolling friction as opposed to, you know, getting the inertial thing going. So we're gonna say maybe it's only 12 pounds once it's going. So now that I have that, I'll say compute. And it comes back and it says right here, 90% of the average guy can do that. 90% of the average women can do that. And also for the initial load, fine, and for the sustained load, right? So pushing 18 pounds, which is the initial load to get the cart going, 90% of everybody can do that. So that's actually good to know. And I remember back in the days when I was in football in high school, and the coach would get on that blocking sled and say, push, push, push. So let's do that. I'm gonna go over here. I don't know, maybe the blocking sled was like 80 pounds, you know, because there's two of us pushing. And once you got it going, maybe it was only like 60. So let's say this is a blocking sled in football instead of our cart. But we take a look at that, it comes back and says, well, 64% of the people can do that, men, and of women, only about 10%. And then here, about 40% of men can keep it going. And this is pushing the blocking sled 25 feet every 5 minutes, right? So that's pretty tough football practice. But again, it's giving you some really good ideas on the capabilities of what a human can do when you're being asked them to do a particular task. And that's really where all these analysis type things come from. So that's kind of in a nutshell, the 4 areas that I wanted to cover, which is our flexible modeling, our e-learning, design exploration, and then finally we topped it off with Mannequin. So all of those are available to you as you switch from or switch to, I guess I should say, a subscription license. Really good capabilities. So I think with that, I'll turn it back to Jenny for some closing remarks.
Just want to say thank you, everybody, for attending the webinar. Again, this is really the benefits of switching from perpetual to subscription. If you have any